Good to see everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for your service. Thank you, Dennis, for your service as well, brother. And happy birthday. Happy birthday, man. Happy sober birthday. Amen. David G., alcoholic addict from Oklahoma. Really glad to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you so much. Always a good meeting with Ashley and Dennis and the others, but well, as I always say, it's a great meeting now that all the rest of you have joined us. So thank you for coming out here all these weeks, week after week after week. We're beginning to come toward the end of this, really. I figure, within the next month and a half or so, we probably should be wrapping it up. And man, it's been a wonderful study. I've enjoyed doing it. It's been as good for me as everybody has said that it has been for them. And I've just absolutely loved reading through the book, sharing experience, strength, and hope. But really the ones that have done the work on this study have been Ashley and Dennis. Without them, this wouldn't have been possible. So I'm so grateful for you guys and all that you do. God, we've shared several holidays together. If you think about it, we shared, 4th of July and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and Valentine's. And now we're headed into Easter. And it's like, wow, it's just, so it's really been a good study. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come out and do that with you guys. And, we've been studying through, looking at the family afterward. We jumped into that last week. We talked about the family after the spiritual experience, how self comes in. It gives us some really good ideas. And if we're not really grounded in our experience, staying connected to the power and staying accountable to each other is very easy for self to slip in right here and to take over and start giving us certain ideas of how the family ought to be behaving now that we're sober and doing better. Or that's been my experience anyway. So, these chapters give us a lot of good things to look at. I always like to look at the book pretty closely. Some have said, maybe you should pick it up, go a little bit faster, and some says, no, it's okay. But, I just kind of, before any time that I ever speak, go to a meeting, speak at a meeting, whatever, I always give that to the power, and whatever comes from that's what comes from that. So, I don't expect that to be any different through the rest of this, but, I don't want to drag around in it. So let's go right to it. Page 125, the very bottom says this: many alcoholics are enthusiasts. Anybody relate to that other than myself? I mean, man, we come out of this thing enthusiastic, ready to go. Let's get it on. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, we hit a wall. We get resentful. We get mad. We lash out at the family. We strike out at somebody out in public, or somebody cuts me off in traffic, and yeah. And so, but we are enthusiasts, and we run to extremes. At the beginning of recovery, men will take as a rule one of two directions. And I've seen this over and over, not only in my own life, but with the men that I sponsor, the families that I've been able to be a part of. We're going to go one or two directions here. We're going to plunge into frantic attempt to get on our feet in business. I know for me, I'd been broke for so long. I really didn't know a whole lot about work, and I'd been to jail for a long time, in and out. And I just really didn't know a whole lot. I ended up going into to work for my tribe shortly after I sobered up. I spent 6 years with them. And that really helped me to get on my feet, because I worked a night shift. I was able to study the book and go through the steps as outlined in the book. And so for me, I took the second part of it that it's talking about here. It says, or he may be so enthralled by his new life that he talks and thinks of little else. And that's exactly how I was. Everything was about recovery. I didn't care who it was. Somebody show up, they didn't know anything about recovery. I'm ready to tell them all about it. I remember one guy that I worked with. He said, man, you read that same book every night. Been reading that book forever. What is that book? And I showed him that book, and he said, I kind of thought about that one time. So I really began to sell him on recovery. I was going to give him a book, and hell, he didn't want one. Oh man, I got mad. I got upset. I felt like, he needed that book, and it was, it was just so crazy where I was at in my mind at that time. But that's all I talked about. That's all I thought about. And if you would ask my wife, that probably went on for several years, starting groups and this and that. But it says in either case, certain family problems will arise. And it does. Either I'm going away to work all the time, I have little time for the family, or I'm so wrapped up in recovery and meeting and speaking and doing this and this, I have little time for the family there as well. So problems are always going to arise out of that. I think it was, what was that, page 19 or 20 made it very clear in this book that our most important demonstration lies within our respected homes, occupations, and affairs. And it's kind of in that order for me these days. But the writers tell us right here, we have had these experiences galore. We think it dangerous if he rushes headlong at his economic problem. The family will be affected. Also pleasantly at first as they feel their money troubles are about to be solved. And I like to look at the word feel because I kind of felt that way myself. And I know that self is governed by feelings and issues and attitudes and beliefs and concepts. So, just because I feel something's going to happen doesn't mean it is. But the problem is I put expectations on top of that. And I expect this to happen. And then when it doesn't, I get upset and I get resentful. And so, I want to watch out for those feelings that my money troubles are about to be solved. And, absolutely. When we sober up, we definitely want to get back on our feet and we want to start making right the wrongs that we've done. But that takes a while. And I think sometimes, at least most guys I've sponsored, a lot of men will tell me, no, I got to work. I can't meet at that time. I got to do this. I got to be with my family. And I was like, hell, a month ago, none of that mattered. None of it. So now all of a sudden that you're sobered up, you're beginning to go through the steps. You don't think they're going to just a little bit of time here, that they're not going to want you to do that, because without recovery, without God, as I understand God, there will be none of this to worry about anyway. I will be caught up in the disease and I will be gone. So it says, not so pleasantly as they find themselves neglected. That's the problem. Dad may be tired at night and preoccupied by day. He may take small interest in the children and show irritation. There's another form of self. Remember, all the way back in the doctor's opinion, it told us irritable, restless, and discontent. We want to watch for this even when we're sober, because if we don't, these things will pile up, and the next thing you know, we'll take action based on those feelings and emotions. And it usually leads somewhere bad for us addicts and alcoholics, or it does this one for sure. So he may take small interest in the children. He may show irritation when reproved for his delinquencies. If not irritable, he may seem dull, boring, not gay and affectionate as the family would like him to be. Mother may complain of inattention. They are all disappointed and often let him feel it. All of this, we see self just all over this deal. And what's so bad is I think that I'm in the right because I'm sober. I'm trying to help other alcoholics. I've got a job now. I need to be working. I need to work with other alcoholics. I don't know anything about balance yet at this point. No one has really showed me how to live as a recovered person. That's why these back chapters are so important for us to study and apply. So she may complain a bit, they're disappointed and often let him feel it. Beginning with such complaints, a barrier arises. And that's what I do. I put a wall right there. He's straining every nerve to make up for lost time. There's no need in all that. That's what I tell my guys. There is such a thing here called easy does it. And when I went to live meetings for so long, you would always see those up on the wall. Easy does it. First things first. They had one up there that said, think. I thought, man, I like that. And I can remember my sponsor shut me down. He said, that don't apply to you. All the rest of them except for that one. That one don't apply to you. So, I try to remember that now. So no, think, okay? If you're new or if you're old. So he's striving to recover fortune and reputation and feels he is doing very well. Anytime I'm doing that, I'm putting something before my family. And ultimately, I'm putting it before my recovery because I'm focused more on that than I am on really what I need to be doing here. Sometimes mother and children don't think so. Having been neglected and misused in the past, this is where those memories start coming up. This is where, it talked about the accusing. That's where it talked about all these things that we remember. Why wouldn't they think that, though? Having been neglected and misused in the past, they think Key words here. So they're suffering from self too, right? They think Father owes them more than they are getting. They want him to make a fuss over them. And of course, he's not doing it. And when we don't do that, what does that usually bring on? You can ask any man on here that doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to his wife at different times. And I can tell you that's a resentful situation most of the time, or at least hurt feelings. They expect, there's another part of self. There's always those expectations. They expect him to give them the nice things that they used to have before he drank so much, and to show his contrition for what they suffered. But Dad doesn't give freely of himself. He doesn't know how to do that yet. We just don't. When we come in here and we begin to recover from self, it takes a long time for us to get more in the attitude of giving than receiving. I did that even going to meetings for the longest time. I'd just go there to get something for me. I never really went to see what I could contribute to that meeting. And I remember a sponsor telling me, when you go to that meeting to see what you can give rather than what you can get, then you will become a part of the meeting instead of apart from. And at that time, I really didn't understand that, but I understand that very well today. So we don't give very freely of ourselves. And not only at home, that's anywhere. I never gave 100% to my job. And I was sober a lot of those years. You know, some of the biggest amends that I owe, and even to this day, I have one more left. And it's a lot of money. That come because I didn't give freely of myself. Look at what this says. Resentment grows. Now, we know that that's a common manifestation of self, according to page 64 in this book. And when resentment grows, I don't give freely of myself. I begin to think they owe me a little more than what they've been giving me. Now, forget the fact that I'm making over 6 figures a year at this time. They owe me something, and I start taking shortcuts, and I start taking from them. Well, when I bottom out, and I go through this process, and I come to amends, that's going to show up. And when that shows up, I'm going to have to become willing to do something about it. And when I did, the destruction that I seen that I left behind, sober member here, all those years, it was very ugly to look at. It really was. He becomes still less communicative. Isn't that how we do? Self draws us into it, to ourself. Sometimes he explodes over a trifle. Anybody other than me ever done that? Look at how self set that entire thing up until he takes action based on all of those emotions, and look what the outcome is. He explodes over a trifle. That's the effect. It definitely was not the cause. The cause was all the things we pointed out up above. The family's mystified. I can remember them doing that many times. My God, you're supposed to be recovered. You're supposed to be sober. You acting like a drunk man again. Crazier than hell. So they criticize. Where does that come from? We know about the critical parent. Most of us that have done any kind of work with the inner child or anything like that, we know about the critical parent within. And we know that anytime we do that, we know that's self. So they criticize, pointing at how he's falling down on his spiritual program. Never mind about theirs, you know. But they're going to take a good look at ours. So, but look at this great promise. This sort of thing can be avoided. And that's what we want. We want to avoid that like the plague. The book keeps saying that over and over and over. Both Father and the family are mistaken. See, it doesn't mean that we're so wrong that it can't be made right. We're just mistaken. And the book talks about mistakes over and over. And a mistake is something that can be corrected. It's not a life sentence. I've got some brothers and sisters on here and in other places that are struggling pretty bad in their recovery right now. They are. But you just made a mistake. That's all it was. It's not a life sentence. I promise. That mistake can be corrected. We need to turn our thinking. We need to turn our thoughts. We need to come back to what we do here. Get closer to prayer. Reach out to brothers and sisters. You know, people tell us all the time, call if you need to. Well, if I call and I need to, and you know, and somebody's not there, I'm going to call somebody else and somebody else. But we got to do what we got to do here. It's a mistake. That's all it was. And it's the same thing with the family. Both Father and the family are mistaken. Though each side may have some justification, which really doesn't matter anyway. Anytime I'm trying to justify anything, I'm in self. It is of little use to argue, and it only makes the impasse worse. There's a good direction. There's a direction moving toward the spirit. The family must realize that dad, though marvelously improved, is still convalescing. They should be thankful that he is sober. I never thought about being thankful. You know, I mean, my sons, they sobered up. They got away from all of the things that they were doing. And one of the things as a father that I would do is look at a lot of things they wasn't doing or what they could be doing better or what they should be doing. Tells me right here, I should be thankful that them boys are sober. And I am today. I am so grateful. I just spent a couple hours with my son out on the lake just before this meeting started. We had a beautiful time. He's over 4 years clean from heroin now. I mean, he's slow to get his life together like most of us, but he's doing it. And he's stepping up. So, we should be thankful that they are sober and able to be of this world once more. Man, what a promise. Let them praise his progress. There's a direction. That's something I want to look for in the family. Let them remember not all the crazy shit that he done wrong and all the times that he could have, had a better job if he'd only listened to dad or this or that. But let them remember that his drinking wrought all kinds of damage, and it may take long to repair. If they sense these things, they will not be too seriously, and it is periods of crankiness, depression, or apathy, which will disappear when there is, and that was all self. Let's look at what the Spirit offers. Tolerance, love, and spiritual understanding. That's what I want to give. And once I begin to give that, guess what happens? I begin to receive it. What a beautiful thing. So the head of the house ought to remember that he's mainly to blame. It doesn't say he's completely to blame, but he's mainly to blame for what befell his home. He can scarcely square the account in his lifetime. I guarantee you that there's no way that I can because of what I've done. But he must see the danger of over-concentration on financial success. That's an instruction for me. It's very good to make money. It's very good to have money. But if I'm thinking about that more than I am of my recovery, I can promise you there's not going to be a whole lot of recovery for me because I start taking shortcuts. I become very dishonest, and the next thing you know, I'm in all kinds of trouble. Although financial recovery is on the way for many of us, look at that promise. We found, so this happened to them as well, we could not place money first. We can't. For us, and I love this sentence in this book, it's one of my favorites. Material well-being always followed spiritual progress. It never preceded. So anybody that's suffering from that now, this is a very good sentence to meditate on and pay close attention to, because anytime I put that in the way of spiritual progress, I guarantee you I'm going to fall behind, and not in a good way. Well, since the home has suffered more than anything else, it's well that a man exert himself there. Now it's telling us, it's talking about balance. It continues to talk about balance over and over. He's not likely to get far in any direction if he fails to show unselfishness and love under his own roof. I can remember I had a sponsor that he would tell me that all the time. David, just take care of what's under your roof, and I promise you the rest of the world's going to take care of itself. And I thought, I wonder why in the hell he keeps saying that over and over. Well, as we studied through this book later on, and I come back through this work, I begin to see exactly what he's talking about right here in this sentence. Because if I don't show that unselfishness, if I fail to show unselfishness and love under my own roof, I'm probably not going to show it anywhere else either. It has to start in the home. It has to start with me. It has to. So we know there are difficult wives and families, but the man who's getting over alcoholism must remember he did much to make it so. Our actions seem to impact them in a very big way. I know anybody on here can probably relate to this. As each member of a resentful family begins to see his shortcoming and admits them to the others, he lays a basis for helpful discussion that sounds like the Spirit. Now we're beginning to move in that direction. These family talks will be constructive, whereas before they were very destructive. They were not very well at all. Anytime that I'd come in, somebody questioned me about money or about my job or anything like this, you can bet there was a big argument about to take place over all of that. So, but I like what it says. These family talks will be constructed if they can be carried on without heated arguments, self-pity, self-justification. Look at that little S in front of all this. Self. Resentful criticism, That's self. Little by little, mother and children will see that they ask too much, and father will see that he gives too little. We'll see. What a promise. I will see. That's vision. Well, I would say this is my favorite sentence in the book, but I say that on every page. So one of my favorite sentences in the book is this right here. Given rather than getting will become the guiding principle. And if you remember, we were given the greatest thing in life. When we accepted our powerlessness, we came to believe that something greater than us could restore us from our insane beliefs. And we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. Giving right there, rather than getting, became the guiding principle in our life. Assume, on the other hand, that Father has an outset, a stirring spiritual experience. And I think this is what happened to me in 1994. I suffered for a year in the fellowship. I mean, suffered mentally to the point where I wanted to put a gun to my head and pull the trigger. And that's no lie. I was sober, but that's all I was sober. But a man picked me up and he took me through this book, and that was my very first stirring spiritual experience. And I mean, it was like it was an overnight thing. It absolutely blew my mind. Just as it says over here, right here, overnight, as it were, he is a different man. My life completely changed. I went from being a crazy, wild, rebel, outlaw, crazy bastard. I got people in this room tonight that confirm that that's true, because I was wild. And I mean, overnight, I was a different man all at the beginning. All of a sudden, I began to think about other people. I'd go into a meeting instead of drinking all their coffee up and sitting around talking crap about them. I would get up and make the coffee. I would get, in those days, we smoked in meetings, I would clean all that. I mean, it's just a difference overnight in my behavior. Well, this says he becomes a religious enthusiast. I became the opposite. I became very rebellious at the religious part of it. But I did find spirituality through the 12 steps in my life begin to change in such a way that nothing less will ever do. It just won't. And so I didn't become an enthusiast, but I became an enthusiast going the other way with recovery in the 12 steps in the meetings. This says he's unable to focus on anything else. And that's how I was. It was just recovery, making 2, 3, 4 meetings a day. And not that that's a bad thing if you're new. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying if I have to hide out in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever fellowship that might be, and I want to spend my entire life there, and that's what I did for a long, long time, then I'm really not living the program as it's outlined in the way that I'm able to do today. It's very important as a sponsor that I teach a man how to do that as well. And that's something that we get into pretty quick after I agree to sponsor a man. As soon as his sobriety begins to be taken as a matter of course, the family may look at their strange new dad with apprehension. Then here's another part of self, irritation. There's talk about spiritual matters morning, noon, and night. I can remember that. Even the people that used to counsel me on religion and Jesus and going to church, they got tired of hearing me talk about God. That's all I wanted to talk about, God and what God had done in my life. And it was a beautiful thing. It just was. And so, but I couldn't focus on anything else. I just couldn't. There's talk about spiritual matters morning, noon, and night. He may demand that the family find God in a hurry. Anybody do that other than me? Better hurry up and get to Al-Anon. I mean, you got a chance to go now. If you don't go, it's probably not going to work out for us the rest of our life. And I mean, I would just on and on and on. So, or exhibit amazing indifferences to them and say he is above worldly considerations. God, I believed that for a long time. He may tell mother who has been religious all of her life that she doesn't know what it's all about. I've been down that road a lot. And that she'd better get his brand of spirituality while there's yet time. Well, I've been trying to do that for a long time, and it still hasn't worked out too well in this household. So, I've finally given that up, and I've finally gotten to a level walk with my Creator, and it's been a very good thing. So, well, when Father takes this tack, the family may react unfavorably. And I'm thinking that on page 99, we took a look at Basically, it starts at the bottom of page 98. He says, in many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done. If any results are to be expected, if persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be great. Persistence. And what I'm talking about. I finally, after all these years in recovery, learned how to walk more than I do talk. You know, I think it's more about a demonstration. It's about love. It's about forgiveness. It's about tolerance. It's about patience. I want that. I need to be willing to give that. They may be jealous of a God who has stolen Dad's affections. I see that a lot. Jealous. This book tells me that that is one of the most deadly hazards of an alcoholic. And I think mankind as well, not just alcoholics. To be jealous of a God who has stolen Dad's affections, while grateful that he drinks no more, well, I'm glad that's all over. They may not like the key word here, idea that God has accomplished the miracle where they failed. How could they not? We are beyond human aid. They often forget, not once in a while, but often forget that Father was beyond human aid. They may not see why their love and devotion did not straighten him out. Dad is not so spiritual after all, they say. If he means to right his past wrongs, we know that's our ninth step. That's the principles that we use in our ninth step. Why all this concern for everyone in the world but his family? That's where the unbalanced comes in. That's where a good sponsor can help us to get on track with this. What about his talk that God will take care of them? They suspect he's a bit balmy. He's not so unbalanced as they may think. Many of us has experienced Dad's elation. We have indulged in spiritual intoxication, like a gaunt prospector, belt drawn and over the last ounce of food, our pick struck gold. Joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time he may try to hug that new treasure to himself. Anybody ever get sober and get close to God and listen to all these cool tapes and all this? You don't want to tell anybody about all them cool tapes. I just want to incorporate that as part of my story and come tell it to everybody else so they'll think how wonderful I'm doing. Anybody other than me ever do that? Just wondering. But I like what it says, you know, he has struck something better than gold, because that treasure that I've found within now, that's better than anything that I could have ever planned. He may not see at once that he's barely scratched the limitless load. I tell you that the power of God goes deep. There's no end to it. And we get to demonstrate that every single day here. What a beautiful thing this 12-step process is. So there's a condition. And here it is. It will pay dividend only if he minds it for the rest of his life, 10, 11, 10, 11, 10, 11, and insists on giving the entire product away, 12, 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, over and over and over and over. So if the family cooperates, which usually doesn't happen, but if they will, then Dad will soon see that he's suffering from a distortion of values. When I can see something like that, the veil has begun to lift. I'm starting to see self for what it is. I'm starting to see my actions and my behaviors. I will soon see that I am suffering from a distortion of values. And when I can see that, I see self for what it really is. Thank God for this process, because that's what it showed me. He will perceive, there's another word, perceive that his spiritual growth is lopsided. I could have never done that as long as the family was arguing with me. But when I have a family that's willing to work with me, then I begin to see these things and I can start moving toward their correction. That for an average man like himself, a spiritual life which does not include his family obligations may not be so perfect after all. I still want that vision every day today. If the family will appreciate that Dad's current behavior is but a phase of his development, that's all it is. Remember our book talked about that back over in the promises. You know, the phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. Look at this. All will be well. Man, what a promise. In the midst of understanding and sympathetic families, these vagaries of dad's spiritual infancy will quickly disappear. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Beautiful, beautiful. But there is some danger here, and and because that might not happen, this is what might happen. The opposite might happen should the family condemn and criticize. So it's kind of like, here's your options. Dad may feel for years that his drinking, his using, his acting out, whatever it may be, has placed him on the wrong side of every argument. I can promise you I felt that way many times. But now he has become a superior person with God on his side. I've went through all of that. If the family persists in criticism, this fallacy will take a still greater hold on father. Instead of treating the family as he should, he may retreat further into self and feel that he has spiritual justification for doing so. So paragraph 2 or paragraph 3? What do you want? I know which one I want for sure. So though the family does not fully agree with dad's spiritual activities, and I had that happen. Not everybody's going to want to go to conferences all the time. Nobody's going to want to go to meetings all the time. You know, I mean, that's all my activities consisted of in those days. I didn't see that there were many things that you could do in nature. I didn't see that there's many things like my brother Dennis T. He would go out and pick up trash for the hell of it. What's spiritual about that, you know? I tell you what, it takes you out of yourself. It helps out your community. And I guarantee you, if you're suffering from a resentment, if you're suffering from self, do what he did. Because I promise you, that came over me. When he first started talking about that a couple of years ago, I thought, that's good for him. I started doing some work with a old Cherokee Indian man. He said the same damn thing, only in other words. And I started doing that. As I started going out places, I started seeing I just started watching for it, and I seen it everywhere. It was unbelievable. And I just started picking it up. And wow, what a beautiful, what a beautiful thing that's turned out to be, because I come out there feeling more peaceful. Seems like I catch more fish that day. It's just, I don't know. It's trying to take care of things that I played a part in neglecting and trashing for so long. So yeah, it works. So not everybody may fully agree with dad's spiritual activities, but they should let him have his head. Even if he displays a certain amount of neglect and irresponsibility toward the family, it is well to let him go as far as he likes in helping other alcoholics, because at least he's not drinking, he's not using, we're not acting out, we're not lusting, we're not doing the things that we did before. So if I'm pouring too much time into an alcoholic or a sexaholic, then, you know, there's at some point that's going to work itself out. But if I'm being criticized for that, I promise you I'm going to withdraw more into myself. And it usually doesn't turn out very good. And during those first days of convalescence, this will do more to ensure his sobriety than anything else. That's a promise. More than anything else. More than going to meetings, more than any of that. Though some of his manifestations are alarming and disagreeable, we think that dad will be on firmer foundation than the man who is placing business or professional success ahead of spiritual development. Of course he is. We will be less likely to drink again. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm looking for right there. Less likely to drink again, act out again, drug again, whatever it may be. And if there's anybody on here tonight that is struggling with that, look closely at these directions. Because, I mean, they're here for a reason. We think dad will be on a firmer foundation than the man who is placing business or professional ahead of spiritual development. Wow. Well, those of us who have spent much time in the world of spiritual make-believe, I think every one of us on here have done that at some point. But here's the great thing about that. We have eventually seen. And anytime I see that word see or seen or saw, it's almost like that's an awakening. That's the beginning of an awakening. I eventually seen the childishness of it. This dream world has been replaced by a great sense of purpose, accompanied by a growing consciousness of the power of God in our lives. My God, what a promise. And all I need to do is kind of cooperate with them as they're being crazy and working with thousands of alcoholics a day and all of that. and I get an opportunity to step back and watch my loved one recover and have a growing consciousness of the power of God in their lives, nothing could be more beautiful than that. We've come to believe that he would like us to keep our head in the clouds with him. But there's another part to this, that we ought to keep our feet firmly planted on earth. In other words, and I heard a girl say this at a meeting one time, I was talking all this great spiritual stuff and on these steps and what it does and this. And she said, I'm going to tell you something, David. She said, don't get so spiritually good that you're no earthly good anymore. And man, I wanted to slap her. I just did. I was like, wow. Yeah, but it was the truth and it hit me hard. Don't become so spiritually good that you're no earthly good anymore. So we ought to keep our head in the clouds with him, but we need to keep our feet planted firmly on the earth. Why? Because that's where our fellow travelers are, and that's where the work must be done. It's wonderful to be there with God and all this and that, but it has been my experience when I connect with you, when I help you, I have no closeness to my Creator like I do when that happens. That for some reason, that's just the way it always has been. So that is where our work must be done. These are the realities for us. We have found nothing incompatible between a powerful spiritual experience and a life of sane and happy usefulness. They seem to run hand in hand. One more paragraph and then we'll quit. I'd like to hear from you guys. One more suggestion. One more question, one more suggestion. Whether the family has spiritual convictions or not, and this is very hard. I didn't like this when I first started reading this. They may do well to examine the principles by which the alcoholic member is trying to live. They can hardly fail to approve these simple principles, though the head of the house still fails somewhat in practicing them, and I promise you, we all do. Nothing will help him. Nothing will help the man who is off on a spiritual tangent so much as the wife who adopts a sane spiritual program, and that was never my experience in the beginning. And as a result, I don't have that partner anymore, but I can tell you that it's very important that we come together in unity in that way, or it has been for me. And it says that they make a better practical use of it. This has been a great study, probably more reading than studying, but I hope that it's helped somebody here tonight. And, we'll finish this chapter off next week, and we'll be looking to move into the employers and then a vision for you and wrap up the study sometime in the near future. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Let me share experience, strength, and hope. Really glad to be here and really glad to see everybody. Thanks.
This concludes David's share on tonight's chapter, but we encourage you to keep listening as he answers questions from the audience and shares additional experience, strength, and hope.
I'm not sure what might be something that would be suggested if your wife or family member doesn't want any part of talking about God.
Thank you, Fred. God, I can relate to that, brother. Page 83. And let's drop down to about the second paragraph there. Spiritual life's not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we not urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. Here's the great promise. They will change in time, but there is a condition, and this is it. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. A lot of times I would run around, and I'd snide remarks or I'd do the silent scorn or whatever it may be. And they would say, yeah, and I would bring that up about a relationship with God or whatever. And I can remember wife number 2 saying, why? So I can be like you. And man, that just hit me hard but I did see as time went on that they began to open up to that. And I don't really know what her relationship with God was, but I just knew that if I was going to be able to live sober, that I was going to have to pursue mine. So that's the only way I could answer that question, Fred, is what the book says, that we should not talk incessantly to them about it. They will change in time, and I hold to that promise. I just do. So thanks for your question, buddy.
Thank you.
I really love this part because it's something that I've experienced with where it says, why all this concern for everyone in the world but his family? And that's what my wife feels a lot of times. And when I came in, I was, I knew that I had to put my recovery first. There was no doubt about it. I was a very sick man, and I did. But I think what the program gives me as we practice these principles is it gives me the ability to take some of my life back and to start working on the balance around that. And I just started I was doing meetings every single night. And me and my wife went to a class on a Thursday night, and I stepped back and, I stayed sober and I was doing good. So after that, we were done with that 12-week class. I decided to make Thursday night our date night. That, okay, I'm not going to do a meeting on Thursday night. As much as I love going to that meeting, and started capturing back. And now I have it where I work in the mornings up to about 1 p.m. And after that, it's our time the rest of the day. So I think balance is so important in this program. Early on when I'm convalescing, I definitely need to work at this program. I had a young man tell me today, it's been in a couple months. He goes, well, I just want to get 90 days. And that way I can move on. And I said, really? I'm glad we read this tonight on 129, because if I'd thought about this, I would have shared with him. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he minds it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. Man, I cannot outgive God. The more I work and give away to others, and I love how David always told us, and I think it's coming up on 132, we have recovered and have been given the power to help others. And man, God flows through me when I work with others. And that is one of the most powerful healing processes, not to feed my ego, but to feed my soul of what I'm eating, which is more of him. Yes.
Yeah, I just love, Dennis's experience, strength, and hope. And yeah, it's been a great journey. I love that. I too, there are so many different things that I do different now. And one of the things that you've always heard me say forever and ever is anytime after 5 p.m., I just don't work with guys. I have all day long from 4 a.m. in the morning, 5 p.m. in the evening, but at 5 p.m. it stops. Now, if it's a 911 or something like that, absolutely. But I want to give that time back. I want to give that time on the weekends. There's times that I will cancel things, I just do. But man, it's just been a great joy to watch you, Dennis, and the way that you demonstrate this program. Is beautiful. I like what you said about the guy, because I've had guys do that too, 90 or 100 days or whatever it is, and they all will be well. And I always, what are you going to do on day 91? What then? So, I want to throw a question back at a question. So anyway, happy birthday to you, brother. Love you, man.
Thank you, David. I love that. That's good.
What stood out to me, never seen before on 129, when it says, even if he displays a certain amount of neglect and irresponsibility toward the family, I paused there because I also had to think about myself too. There's been many times when I've not taken care of myself, and I would, read with sponsees instead of eating dinner or cooking dinner for myself. And I just have to watch my own self-care and balance that with recovery. So that's been one of the many lessons that I've learned. But I don't know if you want to add anything, David, but on that note of self-care. But
yeah, I absolutely do. I have a brother here in Oklahoma named Josh A., and he's the same way. When Josh first got this message and come alive with spirit and moved away from self, he would do the exact same thing. And I think many of us do, man. We just dive into this thing. We want to give it away so bad. We want to, not hang on to the treasure anymore like it talks about. We want to give. But if we're not careful, we begin to take from us. And he was like you. There was times that he would be reading with so many people back to back to back in a day that he wouldn't even take time to go to the restroom and stuff. But as time goes on, we begin to see the senselessness and all of that. We're not the savior of the world. We're just not. And if I don't take time to take care of me, what kind of demonstration am I really showing to you and to others? It's just, that has to become a primary. It just does, because we're so good at wanting to do everything for everybody else and then forgetting to do anything for ourselves, or we'll go the opposite way and feel guilty for doing something for ourselves. And I think that's as dangerous as well. So I'm glad to see that you've grown, on past a lot of that stuff now. And it's just, and it becomes more clear as we go along. There is a way to be balanced here and working with others. And I found that because I was working with 30 guys last year there, Dennis, something like that, taking 30 men through this work. And at some point I got so sick there for about 5.5 months. I really didn't think I was going to make it. I developed some kind of rare form of COVID or something, but I had suppressed so much stuff with 30 men. And I was reading with at least 8 different people per day, 5 days a week. I think I looked at it at one point, it was almost 40 hours per week. Hell, that's like a job, a career. And I became so sick that I realized that, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. And I started backing away slowly. Now I may do 1 or 2 calls in a day. That's about it. So we do learn how to take care of ourselves here. If we don't, life has a way of teaching us. So thanks a lot, Ash.